If there are people who prefer my failed attempt from 2017 over my successful attempt from 2022, then it is actually pointing out a huge flaw in the new version. Welcome back! I have something for you here, but I'm not gonna show you yet. First, story time. For those who don't know, I started digital art back in 2016 and I started the whole thing with photo manipulations in Photoshop. Yes, of course it was a pirated copy, what do you think of me? And in 2016 I got myself my first digital drawing tablet, the Wacom Intuos Draw S tablet. I used that tablet to make goofy pictures like these two. These are literally robot arms from our technician school, and these are just random, most likely copyrighted stock photos. Back in the day, what I was doing with these is I just got together some goofy idea and then slapped a bunch of effect layers on them, and I slapped a bunch of solid colors with different layer modes on them. I must have consciously decided not to think about elements of the pictures blending together, and of course I put a necessary lens flare on every picture, and that was it. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed making these, but they were really restrictive, so then I started looking into digital painting, and somewhere during 2017 I made my very first digital paintings. So how does that mysterious thing come in here? This picture was one of my first portraits. It is awful. I made it sometime in 2017. I literally had no idea what I was doing. I just scribbled around until something started working. I just literally saw the video titled How to Paint Like a God by Boro CG, or Boro Dante as he was known back then, and I felt that this is it. I just achieved godhood through watching that one video, and let's paint something. And this was the end result. I would feel pretty dishonest if I didn't show you the originals for this picture. So this portrait was based on these photos, and she is a model named Jessica Swan. Let me just quickly... Her name is spelled like this because I suppose nobody being able to write down your name must have been a fun gimmick. And if you want to look her up, I advise you to do it with caution, because the fact that she has clothes on these pictures doesn't carry on to the rest of the collection, if you know what I mean. I just liked this dress with that hat and I wanted to turn it into a painting, and I also combined it with one of these basic Windows XP wallpapers. Some of you might remember these nice early 2000s times, and this is the result. I've been thinking about remaking this picture for a long time because, let's just face it, this picture is really ugly. Anatomy and volume and everything, perspective is non-existent. The character is really stiff. These are just literally random facial features that are slapped together to this amalgamation of a face. Literally the best part is this hat, and I copied it from this picture. Like, that tells you a lot. It was just time to remake this picture and see how much I improved in these 5 years. Are you ready for the reveal? There we go. Now let me show you how it all came together. Unlike 5 years ago when I pretty much just worked on it on one layer, I mean not literally one layer, but I was just putting down color spots on top of color spots without any possibility of backtracking. Just building up an endless tower of layers with pretty much no organization, which was just impossible to navigate at one point, when the only thing that you can do is add one more layer to the top and try to make it work somehow if you mess up something. Now I started out with a proper sketch and I used layer modes to build up my shadows and lights on top of a base color. I also kinda made a big mistake here with implementing the shadows of the leaves into the main big shadow layer of the whole character. It ended up being a bit more organic workflow than adding the whole thing in the end, but it was also quite confusing me a lot of times, which can be seen a little bit in the end result. When I say that, what I really mean is that sometimes I had no idea what shadows belonged where, and what is like a clothing fold, and what is a facial feature casting a shadow, and what is a leaf shadow. You know, when you're staring at it for so long, then you kind of end up with a blurred vision, and you don't really know anymore which one is which. Then of course at one point I just switched into rendering everything on the top, only keeping the background and the few light layer effects separately, like the light rays and the light fall off on the character. Before the end, when I was done with this version, I decided that okay, it is going well, but I want to push it just a little bit more. So I posted this version of the picture alongside with the 2017 version on Reddit. I know, big mistake already, and I ended up receiving a bunch of feedback. What I was really expecting is people telling me a lot about facial anatomy, because that is the thing that I felt was the weakest on this picture. But actually people kept telling me that I'm pretty okay with facial anatomy, and that the much weaker parts of the pictures were actually not anatomy related. The thing that most people pointed out is the contrast between the character and the background, and just the overall level of contrast on the character. First of all, just the level of details and the values of the background matches the character's details and values way too much. These two elements on the picture are competing with each other, which is not the best thing to show a character. I also had a really big line dependency with the clothing. Overall, it's just something that I still haven't studied enough. I also broke this rule that the brightest part of the shadow should always look darker than the darkest part of the light area. This is mainly the result of me being confused with the whole complex lighting scenario. Maybe I was just trying a little too hard to show off this light effect on the picture, and I ended up creating more mistakes that I wasn't ready for. Somebody pointed out that the hat was less three-dimensional than the original one and looked a little less interesting. Well, that's mostly because I directly copied this hat from a photograph, but it still applies, and this hat is just blank. But overall, I was really surprised that people were pointing out that my biggest weakness was not the anatomy. I mean, yes, this anatomy is not the best. People actually telling me that I should focus less on the anatomy and more on the values and the clothing. That actually was, well, that was a big surprise for me. So I spent like another half an hour or something. On the second version, I made a smoother transition on the clothing, and I also removed some of the liney parts to make the clothing a little bit more believable. I also pimped the hat, added this nice color and a little light and shadow to the sides, but the most noticeable improvement is that I toned down the background both in contrast and saturation. Now the character is much more in focus and we are not that much distracted by the background. Actually, one thing that I just wanted to point out is my ego. Like, just look at this giant sign that I put there, and look at my current one, the tiny little thing in the corner. Sometime between these two I realized that I shouldn't put my signature on the picture like this, like a second character or something. That was really crucial information for you there. But there is one thing that I wanted to mention, one thing that was really unexpected for me. So as I said, many people pointed out things where I improved, things where I could push this one a little further, but there were 2 or 3 people actually who said that they preferred the 2017 version. And obviously it was kind of a shock for me, because obviously we compare these two, we can see that the 2022 version is superior on a technical level. But the reasons why people told me that they liked the old version better, somebody said that she just had more character on this picture, which is something I can kind of see. Like, you can almost see some sort of facial expression, like if she was annoyed by something or if she was about to meet someone unpleasant, and you can see that on her face, while the new one is obviously just a random model expression where you just don't want to tell any story with this portrait, you simply want to show a character. There was the other argument that this version of the picture just looked more stylized and just looked more visually interesting, looked a little bit more unique, or like looked more unique. I don't have the exact quotes in front of my eyes, but that was the main point, that this picture might be technically better than the old one, but the old one just has some pieces of quality other than the technical skill. And it was just something that I kept thinking about. On one hand, you just start asking yourself the question, what is it that you're improving at? Is it only technical skill, but at the same time you're losing your enthusiasm or something along these lines? Like are you actually losing a piece of yourself? Are you actually not putting that much effort into your current picture despite having a higher skill level? My answer for myself is that it is partially true. I don't think that nowadays I would put this much effort into a portrait, and this was actually one other thing that somebody said, that maybe I didn't really dare to turn this picture into something unique, and I focused much more on following the principles, following the rules of how to create a portrait, and that simply there might be a loss of personal touch between these two pictures. I feel like I've been just rambling about this philosophical thing for, I don't know, a few minutes. The reason why I'm saying that it is only partially true is when I was making this picture, I really had no idea what I was doing. Yes, she has an expression on her face, but it's the result of me not being able to paint a generic face. And yes, it has like weird anatomy and weird color choices, because these were the best things that I could ever create. So we could say that this version of the picture is like halfway unintentional. Maybe even all the positive things that they pointed out on this version were just a result of accidents. I really think that if I had the skills back then to turn it into this picture, I would have turned it into this picture. I just didn't know enough, and then my bad decisions ended up creating something that is less uniform and a little bit more unique. And I kept thinking that this could be a reason for me to just simply say that those are not valid, because the things that they liked about this picture are the unintentional things. But still kept me thinking, if there are people who prefer my failed attempt from 2017 over my successful attempt from 2022, then it is actually pointing out a huge flaw in the new version. See, despite learning a lot of technical skill and being able to create this semi-realistic portrait that could be like, I guess, called pretty by most people, and like definitely looks much more skilled than this one, it is just lacking something. It lacks uniqueness, it lacks anything that is really interesting about it. And it lacks that so much that people actually prefer my old, let's just say that, garbage version over this, because that is a picture that unintentionally but contains these qualities. I even made this meme, it might be relatable for some people, when people are saying that, wow, we love your art style, it's so unique, and there's me who's just bad at realism. And it just kinda begs the question, what might be the qualities in this one that are unintentional? It's easy to joke around about me not having a style, and all you interpret as a style is just a collection of flaws. And maybe this work has something that might be lost even more further if I get better on a technical level, and that is something I just have to be conscious about and possibly just not let that happen. So the thing that I can really take away from this whole exchange, I might have become better on a technical level, but I might still be really far from really touching people. I have a few technical skills to push forward, but also I need to sometimes look a little deeper than those, which is something that is so abstract that I can barely wrap my head around, and it's just challenging me to ask myself the question, am I really improving, or do I just know a little more than 5 years ago? Well, that is mostly going to be a question for future me, because it's almost 11 o'clock p.m. and I have a dentist appointment for tomorrow morning. I don't even know if I'm going to edit this video before that or something. Just an update on that. So the dentist looked at my tooth and looked at it for like 1.5 seconds, and then she said, well, that's done, we're pulling it out. Then the painkiller injection didn't work properly, so it was a little bit more painful than it should have been, but everything went nicely, and that's it. My wisdom tooth started growing and it broke the one next to it. That's the story in a nutshell. But either way, thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day. Do some art, even if it involves remaking a 5-year-old project, only to end up with some people who are calling the old version better, especially if that's a possibility. But most importantly, have fun while doing that. Farewell. It is mostly the result of me being confused with the whole light. This is mainly the result of me being confused. This is mainly the result of me being confused with the whole complex lighting scenario.